Well, I'm going to have to do a little bit of a tap dance while our panelists are getting their microphones put on. But in the interest of time, I think I'll start. I think we had a phenomenal morning. The panels were terrific. I think David Balos gave us some very clear and interesting statistics on trade and investment as drivers of globalization. You know, they talk about globalization and international business as being the movement of goods, people, and ideas across national boundaries, and money, of course, as well. And I think we've had a bit of all of that. Looking at the innovation panel really took an unexpected and a very productive approach in looking at the social challenges, that we don't only think of the business dimension, but look at it in a much broader perspective. And then bringing the creative arts to the discussion is something that I think we'll revisit in the panel coming up. And I think that was a great addition and a great idea to show again that we're not one-dimensional in our thinking. The quality of life and infrastructure transportation challenges, I don't think we solved, but it certainly put it front and center with us as we think about what we need to do in Atlanta. So I'm going to ask our panelists to come up, and perhaps we can do it. Claire Angel, you can be to my immediate left. And if we do it alphabetically, that will help. And then Henny Clausen, if you come next, and Terry and Chris.
She wants us to switch.
So you have to move.
This panel is made up of four people who are really globally connected. They have a wealth of international experience around the world and have been, at least in two or three of them in a way, have been connected to the international world and cities through the Atlanta Sister City Commission, which exists to further cultural and people-to-people exchanges and also to share economic development experience and issues with the partner cities. So we have an opportunity here to put more of a focus on the cross-border connections, the global connections for Atlanta, and not so much on what is happening here in Atlanta. So as I introduce them, I'm going to ask them in their discussions to emphasize this global connectedness. And let me start with Claire Angel. Their bios are in the program, but I do want to highlight a few things. Claire is the director of the Office of International Affairs for the Mayor of the City of Atlanta and helps develop the city's international strategy and connectiveness. Prior to that, she was a press attaché in the Consulate General of France. She was in the French Trade Office. She's had postings in Belgium and Argentina, dealing with business development and trade, and comes from Nantes in northwestern France. So plenty of international experience to share with us. Our second visitor, and I'd like to give a special welcome to Henny Clausen, who is the curator of the Memoriam Nuremberg Trials of the city of Nuremberg. And she's in the city to visit with a number of our cultural institutions in the city to see how they can connect and further the civil rights legacy of Atlanta with the legacy of Nuremberg that we know from the end of the Second World War. So here we have someone who can give us a unique outsider's perspective and the way she sees Atlanta. I know you've been here before, but you're also spent 2 or 3 days now meeting with people across the city. Her institution is part of the municipal museums of the city of Nuremberg, so we can then perhaps also look at our own museums and cultural institutions and the role that they play. moving further along, I'll go to Terry. Yes, Terry, you've changed places. Good. Terry Simmons is, not only an attorney with Arnold, Golden and Gregory, but director of their international immigration practice. And of course, immigration had to come up and did come up in the first sessions and remains a really unsolved problem for this country. And hopefully the Congress and the President will find a way of working together on the issue. Terry is and currently serves as a mayoral appointee as chair of the Atlanta Sister City Commission. And it's really in that capacity that I'm pleased that she could join us today. She's been the chair of the commission for over 10 years and had, prior to that, had a relationship with Nuremberg herself. She's been president of the Georgia Indo-American Chamber of Commerce of the Southeast, as well as the German-American Cultural Foundation, the German School Board. She's fluent in German, has had postgraduate study in Tübingen in Germany, and so brings that European and German perspective to the discussion, as well as her exposure to all 18 of our sister cities. And then finally, Chris Young is Executive Director of CFOL, which is not as well known as it could be in the city, although I think a few years ago they had a higher profile that Chris is going to bring back to that position as their director now. It's the United Nations Institute for Training and Research is the English name, and its objective is to help capacity building of state and local governments and civil society around the world. And they have international conferences. I know they do on aviation, particularly at the airport, but other topics as well. And for a couple of times they help drive economic development programs that the Atlanta Sister City Commission put on, day-long conferences here, and they helped us organize that. He was chief of protocol for 2 successive administrations of the state of Georgia. He was also the executive director of the Protocol School of Washington. So he's got a very deep experience in international protocol, which sometimes is seen as a bit of a mystery, but in fact I think is just plain good manners. I don't know if you'd agree on that, Chris. So let me start then by asking each of you what you see as some of the most important characteristics of a global city, not only for Atlanta, but any global city. And I'll go down and start, Claire, with you. We've had some discussion today, and in a way this is starting with a summation, and then we'll move a little deeper into some other questions.
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Try again.
Let's see. Is this better? All right. Characteristic of a global cities, I think first and foremost should be connectivity. How can your city be global if you cannot actually be able to reach that place? And I think that when it comes to Atlanta, that's definitely an aspect that we have and that we still need to nurture, especially in terms of international connection. Another characteristic would be a solid existing and possibly growing foreign presence. And I think that we're building this in Atlanta. We now have the second fastest growing foreign-born population among the U.S. largest metros. Our foreign-born population is a little over 750,000 people, so I think that we're getting there. Another one is also an open recipient community. If your foreign-born population doesn't feel welcome and cherished, at the end of the day, I think you will have difficulties becoming a true global cities. And lastly, and this is the case of very few cities around the world, but a global impact. Very few of these cities around the world can impact global politics or the world's economy. You think of the likes of Washington, D.C., New York, London, Paris, and I think that this is something that Atlanta has the opportunity to play a bigger role in the future. So I would say connectivity, existing foreign-born population, open recipient community, and global engagement.
Annie, would you like to
Yeah, well,
add to that, perhaps?
well, actually, I totally agree in what Claire just said. So, I mean, of course, I would see three most important aspects: the economic aspect, and including the access to a city, including what you've already had been discussing earlier, the transport within the city, things like that. So the city, that certain spaces, certain locations in the cities are really accessible for a lot of people. Then there is, of course, the influence, or the political impact, networks between cities, and if a city can contribute anything to global activities. And then there, of course, is the cultural aspect as well, which is something I actually stand for, which is, of course, I mean, culture gives an identity to a city, but also, of course, is something that attracts people to cities and makes it possible to grow up an international network on cultural aspects. So that's, I think, it's important.
We can come back to that. I think that it's certainly one that I'd like to get your view on. Before we move on, just one little snapshot of Nuremberg. How big would the metro Atlanta area of Nuremberg be?
Well, Nuremberg itself has about 500,000 people. The metropolitan area of Nuremberg is about 1 million. So it's, I mean, small compared to Atlanta. We have, actually, the metropolitan area comes from, it's actually 3 cities have almost grown together. It's Nuremberg, it's the city of Fürth, and the city of Erlangen, which is, maybe some of you know, because it's a huge Siemens place. That's Nuremberg. Nuremberg is, in regards to its international networks, a city which is quite active. We have an international office run by the city of Nuremberg. Nuremberg has 14 sister cities, including larger cities as, for example, Venice in Italy, or Prague in the Czech Republic, Glasgow in Scotland, and then also, of course, smaller, and of course Atlanta, and then also smaller cities from, well, actually all over the world, and there's quite a very active program going on.
So, Terry, from your position as chair of the Sister City Commission, how do you see that fitting in to the important attributes of global city?
Well, for me this morning, it was very interesting to hear from a lot of panelists and the focus on diversity, and also to hear that there were other people who are actually natives of Atlanta. I am one of them as well. I was born and raised here. I have stayed here. I love the city. But I will tell you that 50 years ago in Atlanta, I wouldn't have called our city a global city. At that time, we didn't have the diversity we have now. We didn't have the offerings and the people that we have in our city now. And it's been amazing for me to grow up in the city, stay in the city, work in the city, and see how we've globalized and developed different ethnic areas of people who have added so much to our city. I think that's very critical in a global city, to have people from all around the world living among different religions, among different backgrounds from different parts of the world, and that only helps us to flourish and helps us to grow. I think what's also important in that regard, though, is that it enables our citizens, people who are coming from our area, working in our area, growing in our area, to also have access to other places around the world. And that's what we've tried to do as a Sister Cities Commission with our 18 sister cities, is not only create a platform within the city of Atlanta where people can learn and interchange with people from all around the world, but where we have established partnerships around the world that receive students from the United States, traveling, business people, culture, educational exchanges, etc. It's a very, very important platform, I think.
Good, we can explore that a little bit more, but from your protocol perspective, Chris, but also then very importantly from your present position at, in your present job.
So one of the things we do, the UN has 14 global centers around the world that trains municipalities on the Millennium Development Goals, and all of these municipalities, 5,000 people, 500,000 people, 5 million people, they all want to be a global city. So my recommendation is for the mayor and the council of those cities to line up in front of a mirror, throw cold water on themselves, and slap themselves. Why do I say that? Because the problem with that phrase, global city, is that it means something different to every person, and you get caught in a rut of trying to be all things to all people, which is stupid and a foolhardy way to fail. What I recommend is, when I was moderating a panel in Washington in August, and the White House chef was on the panel, Christetta Comerford. And Chris Comerford's a fantastic person. And in the middle of her presentation, she stopped on a dime, and she said, you know what, the problem with us in the United States when we try to do anything globally is that we run away from the cliche. She said, but everyone comes in search of the cliche. And there was a pause. And she said, here's what I mean by that. And she pointed me out because I was moderating. She said, Chris, how many times in Atlanta have you taken somebody to the World of Coke? I said, 372,905. How many times have you been to the King Center? 1,647,912. And she said, do you get tired of it? I said, yes. She said, but to those people who are coming into your city for the first time, that's what will resonate with them, and that will build a connection with them. And I went on to think about this. International business and internationalization of a city, it's so hyper-competitive today. So if you're doing a business deal, when it gets down to dollars and cents of tax incentives and those kinds of things, eventually all that's going to be a wash to people who come in because they see so much of it. What will make the difference is how they feel. It's what happens on the margins. And as silly as it is to talk about feelings when we talk about great global business, I can't tell you the number of times I've debriefed economic deals, and it did not come down to just pure economics. It came down to how they felt, how their spouse felt, how their children felt, how their employees and senior management felt, and oh, by the way, what the consul general of that country had to say about the atmosphere in that place, and oh, by the way, what the ambassadors say. So when I'm thinking about cities that want to globalize, whatever that means, the first thing and the thing I always come back to as a foundation is figure out what you do well, do it as best as you can, and then from that, it will be a magnet that draws people and allows you to tell a narrative about yourself. So for instance, Atlanta and the civil rights movement and human rights. That's a narrative that very few places in the world can tell. But it's something that not only brings people here, but when your guests and your business people leave, it's something that connects with them. It would be like me taking them down to my farm in South Georgia where I grew up and serving them filet mignon. Well, we ain't a beef farm. Right? I'm going to serve them pig or grits or something that we grow because I'm going to make a cosmic connection with them. People don't come back from Paris and go, oh, we had a really good meeting. No, they remember strolling on the Seine. They remember, going and sitting at a coffee shop in the Trocadero, and everything else comes along with that. So, I look at it from a little bit different perspective, mainly because the work I do is in capacity building with municipalities. And my number one recommendation is always stand in front of the mirror and be honest with yourself. You cannot be all things to all people. It's a fool's errand to do it. Do what you do well and live off of that.
How would you respond, Claire, to
I
that challenge?
I agree wholeheartedly that you need to create that connection. Mary likes to say that all things being equal, at the end of the day, people like to do business with people they like.
Yep.
And so what you need to do is create that emotional connection. Atlanta, I don't like the word branding, but I think you need to establish a narrative of what your city is and portray your city as it is, and do what you're good at. I agree, you cannot be everything.
And if
for
you don't
everybody.
control the narrative, somebody will control it for you.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Penny, let me go back to you then and ask how your experience has been besides the closure due to snow, which kind of upset your schedule, packed everything into one day. What has been your impression of our cultural institutions and the message that we can bring to the world?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really have to say I was really, actually I still am really overwhelmed by the very, very warm welcome I had here in Atlanta. It's my the first time I'm here, and it's really just great how many fantastic and really nice people I met, and people are very open-minded. You know, it's just easy to get in contact. And something I'm saying that because, for example, the area where well, I not originally come from, but Nuremberg, where I have been living now for more than 10 years, is an area which is not very much known for this kind of personality, maybe, to say so. So that was really something I like very much here. Well, my first impression of Atlanta, of course, is it's a really huge city. And I'm here to, the purpose of my visit is actually to visit certain different cultural institutions, research institutes, and so on, to figure out whether they could be an exchange between the municipal museums of the city of Nuremberg, especially, of course, also the exhibition I'm in charge for about the Nuremberg trials. So I've been visiting here places like the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. I've been of course, to the History Center. I've also visited things like the aquarium, so really touristic things that do not have anything to do with my original job. Meeting people from the Bremen Museum or with Emory at Emory University, things like that. And I really see a lot of connecting points between Nuremberg and Atlanta, especially in the field I'm working in. What you just mentioned, the civil rights movement, human rights, that's a very, very strong connection between Atlanta and Nuremberg. And of course, I'm glad to see that, and I'm very much looking forward to the follow-up of my visit. So.
Terry, let me go to you and our time on the Sister City Commission. It's sometimes sort of an unsung hero of the city, or a bit of an orphan, but it also does very good work. And there are 18 cities, and each of them has a very different characteristic, a character about them. From Salcedo and Victor, I'm so sorry that your delegation from the Dominican Republic couldn't get timely visas to attend. And so the mayor had to decline as well, and that's an indication again of our immigration problems. But that's at one side, and you of course have cities like Brussels or Daegu in South Korea, and on it goes. How do you see that mix influencing how we present ourselves as a city?
I think the mix has been very important to a number of different groups, whether you look at the business groups trying to foster and promote economic development. Certainly they've looked to our sister city with Korea, our partnership established there. When we look at investments in the state of Georgia, like the Kia plant, like all of the suppliers that have followed that. Some of the cities are very much focused on the promotion of economic ties and supporting economic development. Others, whether those be cities in Europe, Toulouse or Nuremberg, as we talked about, or cities such as Salcedo or Rio or other cities, have also created a platform for exchange in a variety of different areas. whether that be exchange and Olympic wisdom. We were just talking earlier about an upcoming program about the Olympics and the aftermath of the Olympics. You can see Atlanta interchanging with cities who are also staging Olympics or even trying to stage Olympics and having that sort of exchange as well. In addition, we have partnerships which are focused more on even medical exchange. For example, we have Montego Bay in Jamaica, our past chair, Vin Martin, who sadly passed last year. But you see doctors and other people exchanging humanitarian aid, also with Lagos, Nigeria. And so with all of the various diverse characters, again, it creates a platform for looking to see how Atlanta and people living in Atlanta can benefit from and provide benefit to people around the world through an established friendship or partnership and people on both sides to receive warmly the people who are coming, like Henny.
Do you think, and anyone could pick this up, we may start with Claire even, or even Chris, do you think we leverage the, I can either say expat or immigrant or ethnic communities of Atlanta that are large and diverse? Do we utilize them fully, and how could we do that better? How could we integrate them better into Atlanta's life to make us feel more like a multicultural city?
Well, I think it's absolutely primordial for existing foreign-born population to feel welcome and cherished. We cannot pretend to attract more foreign direct investment, more international visitors if our existing foreign-born population is not thriving. And so that's actually one of the reasons why Mayor Reed launched the Welcoming Atlanta initiative in October of last year. We worked with about 100 stakeholders in the community, and I see some of them here today, Alejandro Cross over there, to really come up with a plan with 20 recommendations of how can we make our city more welcoming to our existing immigrant population. And it comes from creating a multicultural liaison within APD. It is offering English support classes to non-native English speakers. It is to offer programs for affordable housing within the city of Atlanta. So I think there's a wide areas of tools that we can establish in the city of Atlanta for our foreign-born population to feel like they belong to the fabric of the city fully.
And I'll add to that, Atlanta in some ways, and proudly so, is bucking the trend among American municipalities in that. And, you know, we all come from different places in the world and different perspectives, but the American experiment, notwithstanding our great original sins, but the American experiment has always been predicated on persons immigrating to the United States, and in 1 to 2 generations, those persons being involved in the body politic and being involved in the business community, being involved in the cultural community. And what we see in a lot of American cities, and a lot of Mayor Reed's contemporaries are kind of at a loss at how to deal with some of this stuff, is you see segregation on a new scale within cities, almost enclaves, if you will, and there's no assimilation into one body politic. There's no assimilation into one business community. We've got the Hondurans over here, and the Ethiopians over here, the Nigerians over here, and the Brazilians over here. I'm overgeneralizing in a way to a point it sounds flippant, but it is a significant problem because in a lot of cities where you see ethnic strife, American cities where you see ethnic strife and tension, racial strife and tension, it's because there hasn't been a frank, head-on effort not to cause people to lose their identity at all. Because one part of the great American experiment was you kept your identity. So we had Italian Heritage Days and Irish Heritage Days and Brazilian Heritage Days and Mexican Heritage Days, but it was still part of the experience and everyone. And so, you know, that's one thing that if you live in Atlanta, I think you should be proud of that the city is tackling this issue because it is an issue. And if you don't tackle these kinds of things head on, we see around the world today some of the issues that can happen when communities are left to be separate and not brought in inclusively.
Well, our next panel actually will be addressing that from the various chambers' perspectives, so I don't want to tread on their topic too much further. But Any words of advice before we start at Q&A? And please do come to the two microphones if you have any questions. Just one. If you had to give the mayor one bit of advice, or if you wanted to give the city as a whole and the populace one bit of advice.
I think one of the biggest issue we have in Atlanta is that we somewhat lack visibility in many parts of the world. A lot of countries, when they think of the United States, they think about the Northeast, they think about the West Coast. And so we have to really tell that narrative on a global scale. And I think that we have tools in Atlanta to do that. I'm really hoping that the burgeoning and thriving film and entertainment industry, for example, can be really leveraged to increase, to promote the image of Atlanta worldwide, especially among millennials. I also think that we have an incredible tool with Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Over 95 million passenger transit or come to Atlanta through Hartsfield. And I think that we have to do a better job at capturing some of those transiting passengers to stay in Atlanta, and also providing a true Atlanta experience to those passengers, even if they don't stop, so that we incentivize them to stop during their next travel. And I think that we're very fortunate to have Miguel Southwell as our new general manager, because he is extremely internationally minded, and I really think that it will bring that to Hartsfield-Jackson.
Any questions? Yes, please.
Hello. Just to add to what you said, in my international business class at Georgia State, we did talk about the importance of creating an experience behind like a business deal, trying to close a business deal, because that's what people would count on. So we did learn that in class. So yay, Robinson College of Business. But I wanted to ask that for making Atlanta, I guess, more welcoming for different people from different countries, what would you say about for instance, this is something I know. I have had the opportunity to travel to several countries from Atlanta. And for instance, if you're going to, when I went to the UK, the gate for the flight I used was in a nice area with many different shops around, so we could just, just hang out around before we boarded the plane. But the times I have gone back to Nigeria, which is where I'm originally from, the gate is usually the last gate all the way down on the Delta flight, all the way down at the airport. And there's literally nothing there. And it's kind of hot there. And we're just, so you really don't get to hang out there because you have to. And, it's a long walk from different gates. But all the many times I have traveled, which many, many times, that's where the gate always is. And it's a number of flights that go out. And I know they have one direct flight to Lagos every night. And that's the gate. Right. So
I'm not gonna make Claire answer that, because I don't want to have to put heat on her. But I'll tell you this much, and this is all sincere. When I was Chief of Procon Director of International Affairs for the state of Georgia, the number one, outside of can you get me master's tickets, which was number one, the number one question we got from anybody at any level, from ministers on down, was can you do something about A, the immigration experience at Hartsfield-Jackson? The answer is no, none of us are federal employees. Now, we can certainly work with them, but that's a whole other issue for which I know the two of us have taken more heat than we know what to do with. And number two is, well, I'd rather be flying out of the F terminal, the international terminal, where that's a Delta decision. Now, your point, though, is a larger point, right? So it could be the aircraft type, that it can only park at certain areas. It could be a Delta decision based on how the flow of the traffic is. I don't know. That's a decision they make, because when they lease the space from Hartsfield-Jackson, and then they have control over where they place it. But your point does go to a larger point about the importance of a Delta, a Coca-Cola, a Home Depot, a UPS, a Newell Rubbermaid, an AGCO, and all of these great Fortune 500 companies, but not just them, the taxi operators, the hotel front staff, the people who work at the Georgia World Congress Center, having a seat at the table when a lot of these discussions are being had about how perception becomes reality. There's an old movie called The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. If you've never seen it, it's a great Western. Jimmy Stewart's in it. The last line of that movie is, "When the legend becomes fact, print the legend." Doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's when people perceive something to be, it is. And so that's the situation here, when people perceive it to be. So I think that, I don't have a good answer for you, and Claire, you probably will correct everything I just said. I don't have a good answer because it's not a decision none of us make. But it does stress the importance of having the business actors at the table when decisions are getting made.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's interesting, Chris, you say that, and it brings back to your point about welcoming. Some years ago I did a study of foreign investment in the state of Georgia, but other states too, and what stood out was good old-fashioned Southern hospitality was one of the top things mentioned by companies that decided to locate here. The other was, incidentally, education and the quality of education in the state, and hopefully we're making some progress on that as well. I know we're just about at the end of our time, but I want to wrap up and any more. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not so much more a question. My name is Tiffany Jones, and I'm from the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta Airport. And I just want to say to the person who was just up there, we are very well aware of the long things that we have to go there, and we have a program that we're working on now, which is Southern Hospitality, is towards that. And we know that it's just like he said, there's the planes dictate where they go, and it's a Delta thing. And that, don't judge us on that. We're really, really working on that. So don't hold it as against us. And I had to say something because it's my airport and it's my baby. So let's talk afterwards about some things that you see you might want to change in the future.
Thank you.
And Cedric, if I could add to that very quickly. One of the nice things in Atlanta, also there was a comment about Customs and Border Protection and the reception we receive when we come into Atlanta. There are certain things we see, all of us have different roles within the room, but there are things that we see that only happen in Atlanta. And I will tell you, I was Customs and Border Protection liaison for Atlanta Hartsfield for many, many years for the Immigration Lawyers Association, and we did get complaints about officers not receiving people with the kindness, or people, when they get off flights, not being received with the welcome that they should get. Well, Customs Border Protection took it upon themselves to sit down with the business community and with others and to talk about that. And actually all of the people who are working there, who are contractors before you see the actual officers, have gone through a training, a friendliness training.
And it ain't that way at JFK.
And it's not that way at JFK, right? So, in fact, I was also on our national CBP liaison committee, and I will tell you, I have only seen this happen in Atlanta. I hope it's happening other places, but that's where we are taking initiatives with each other after hearing comments like that to make some things happen.
I think many people who've traveled a lot would agree that it's improved hugely
Absolutely.
over the last 5 years. Certainly with the new terminal, but even somewhat before. It's night and day.
But a lot of the conversation that we've heard today has been focused on the city of Atlanta. But so much of the international population that exists is in Gwinnett County and DeKalb County and in other areas. Plus, a lot of the laws and a lot of the atmosphere when you're talking about the welcoming of international citizens seems to be determined at the state level and in the state legislature. How do you perceive the ability for Atlanta and maybe the greater Atlanta being able to work in an environment where sometimes Georgia is not viewed as being open and welcoming to the outside world?
I think as a city, the only thing you can do is to first focus on what you can have an impact on. And that was the purpose of welcoming Atlanta. There are very concrete steps that we as a city can do to improve the ecosystem for our immigrant population. And by doing that, we hope that we will be leading by example. We do a lot of advocacy work with our state colleagues. But at the end of the day, it's their decision. So we're hoping that by leading by example, we will be able to move the needle.
And I'll add this as Chris Young, private citizen. If I were Emperor of Georgia for a day, I'd change the governance model in metropolitan Atlanta to make a lot more sense. We saw it last year during the ice storms, where poor Mayor Reed got flack for a lot of things that went on in Atlanta, a city of 500,000 in a metropolitan region of 6 million that has untold numbers of municipalities, county commissions, city councilors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was patently unfair, but nobody outside the city of Atlanta understands that fact. And that fact is determinative in a lot that happens in regional government here. So what is the answer? Well, I mean, barring a significant, drastic change in how the city is governed, I think actually personally it starts with this is me personally, it starts with the relationship that the governor and the mayor of Atlanta have. I think that relationship has not always been healthy. And when that relationship is healthy, as it is now, I think it begins to have positive tentacles that goes out into other parts. And you see that in the tenor of the debate on transportation right now in the General Assembly. The chairman of the House General Assembly Committee, the House Transportation Committee, is from Ocilla, it's in my home district. My parents' house is 8 miles from his house. I've known Jay Roberts and his family forever. For an Ocilla farmer to be in charge of transport, but more importantly to get up and say, we need rail. I'm paraphrasing here. He probably didn't say it exactly like that. But to say, we need different solutions, right? And this package that's going through is probably anathema to a lot of Republicans, at least on its surface. Well, we don't know what will happen. I mean, it's certainly not crossover day. I mean, you don't know what will happen. The very fact that this debate is being had and leadership is talking about it, that's a sea change in Atlanta. And I don't think that we should sell it short that that's happening, and see where it goes. See where it goes from there. But you know, I think that as a private citizen, I'd love to see something that was a little bit more governable, if you will, within the metropolitan region.
But just to follow up, I mean, a lot of people are viewing Delta's tax advantages being taken away as punishing Delta for being outspoken against the policies of immigration. You know, having come out last year and the year before criticizing the state government for enacting anti-immigration policies, as well as some other things that the state legislature has wanted to enact.
Well, you never know. Lightning could strike in Nebraska and a light bulb goes out in Savannah, and some people are going to find a link. I mean, people are going to search for a link that they can find. And I don't know all the reasons. I don't work under the Gold Dome anymore. I don't know why certain things happen. But I do know this. I do feel, and Claire, until you might have an opinion, I do feel that the atmosphere and the dialogue is so, while not all the way at a solution, is so much better than it has been.
Absolutely. I mean, the level of coordination now we have within different layers, being the city, the metro, region, the state, and it sells very well. Mayor Reed will be on a cybersecurity mission to Israel, led by the state of Georgia, with the support of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. These are initiatives that a few years ago would not have been possible. And when you enter a room to promote the state, the city, with different level of governance in attendance, this is a level of cooperation that you don't see in many places, and people are blown away by this level of coordination and cooperation.
I think on that note, that positive note, I'd like to thank our panelists for their contribution and stimulating discussion. Thank you.